So I have a personal story about these ride-sharing companies because I use them so often. So this morning at 4:45 a.m. when I get to work, it's pouring in Chicago.
Yes, it is.
And I live a mile away, so I check Uber and it was like $15 and Lyft was like $17, which is ridiculous. I mean, I live a mile away.
A mile.
But I always compare the two. So then I obviously went with Uber, even though I'm still mad I paid $15 to get a mile. This is kind of what I think everybody does.
Now, is that because of the weather?
I'm sure, because there was a surge.
And so what's the normal rate,
like
would you say?
$6 or $5?
So $5 or $6. It went because it was raining. And now here's the thing. From an old guy who used to take taxis a lot in cabs, the difference was you couldn't find a cab in the rain.
And you certainly couldn't find a cab in the morning.
And it rains,
that
you're
early.
just done. You just stand there and no cabs ever show up.
Right. But Landon, I know that your data shows a bit of a discrepancy between the two, and similar to what I'm talking about here. So tell us about your data.
Yeah. So that's a tough story, Jenny. $15 a day would add up.
I know.
But yeah, Uber and Lyft is a fun one that we've been looking at obviously for years, and for a long time. The story was that Lyft was taking market share, and we were more bullish on Lyft than we were on Uber. But that was mostly due to the fact that happiness was higher. So we're looking at happiness here, and this is a percentage of people who are happy with their experience, essentially. And one thing that you'll notice that since 2014, it's been in a significant downtrend. It's starting to flatten off, but for both companies, people are less and less happy with their experiences. They're still a little bit more happy with Lyft than they were with Uber, but I think a lot of that had to do with the tipping on Lyft, which was exclusive to Lyft for a while. I think Uber added it in 2017. Since they added it, there's really no difference between the two, and I think drivers tried just as hard on both platforms. But what we've seen is that, if you look at the purchase intent chart, you'll notice that Uber is basically dominant. I mean, they're about 4 times the size of Lyft when it comes to both market cap and the amount of dollars that they bring in. They have the same. I'm not sure if this is a term. It's not PE ratio, but PR ratio, price to revenue. I'm not sure if that's a term, but they're about the same, about 4 times the size Uber is. And when you look at that purchase intent chart, it's Uber is doing really well, and they're kind of accelerating away from Lyft. Lyft was taking market share, but Uber's pulling back. Fighting back. But really, I don't think that's the story. I think the story is that this is not really a profitable long-term. This is not a profitable long-term type of thing that they can do because, you've got high driver turnover, you've got all the stuff that Kevin, you were just talking about in the last segment with the employee rules.
Yeah.
And so if you've got one company is basically focused on drivers, and that's Lyft, that's getting people A to B, but Uber is doing a much better job of actually focusing on a sort of being the local delivery logistics company. So you can see that when they added in Uber Eats, they instantly were competing against other companies that took a long time to develop their apps. And so with a snap of their fingers or just adding one button, they can do a lot. I think for the future, Uber's looking a lot more forward as being more of a logistics company, whereas Lyft is focusing on riders, and I think that's a mistake.
I think that's a really good point, Landon. The question I have kind of around the data is, as Jenny said, maybe you check both, but I think if we asked Jenny what she did, either answer, it would be, I Ubered to work today. It's kind of used as a verb. I don't hear a lot of people saying I Lyfted to work, even if they use Lyft. Does that skew any of this purchase intent, you think? Or do you think when people are actually talking about it on social media, they tend to actually specify which one they use?
They do specify. I would agree. It has a little bit of that element to it. When people talk about getting a soda, they say Coke, they don't say I'm getting a Pepsi, that kind of thing, Kleenex, all that. I get it, but I think that overall our data does reflect the 4x kind of size difference between the two companies. But yeah, I think that people like Jenny and everyone who use it, I do the same thing. You compare the two and you go with the one that's cheaper because it takes about 15 seconds to compare the two prices, and you're always going to pick the cheaper one because there is no difference between these two companies, really.
There isn't, but I have to say that on social media, sometimes we look at companies or I see really positive things. Like Dave & Buster's was really positive. This conversation, not so positive. It was so negative on Twitter this morning, which, I mean, I actually like both of the companies. I was shocked at how people complain about them. And it's like, it's your only way to go point A to B. To me, it's my only option. So I'm like, I can't really complain, I guess. But the noise on Twitter was so negative on both companies. One really did not outperform the other, honestly. So our first tweet says, Once again, I've been screwed over by Uber. Better look at your receipts carefully or they will charge you more than the agreed upon rate. They do it without telling you, so they basically steal from us. Not the first time this has happened. So to add some context on this, Uber has excellent customer care, and I've gotten charged more than what I originally agree upon, and then they always refund you. So this person just doesn't know the app.
Is that an agreed upon rate, or is it an estimate of what it's going to be?
It's an estimate. So if you take too long, or if your ride takes longer than expected,
Right.
you get a fee. Basically.
Yeah, so I mean, this kind of writes it as if this was a signed contract. So there is some gray area on something like this. Landon, one thing that I guess I was when I used this more as a commuter thing too, though. Uber, one thing they do is they allow you to get a discount by turning your money into Uber Cash, and they also have their rewards program. How much did that influence kind of a shift more towards brand loyalty to these, or is it still just a price battle?
I think generally speaking, it's a price battle, but power users like Jenny who use this a lot are going to love all the features. You can split the cost, you can split rides, you've got you can do pickups in the future. You've got rewards programs. I think Uber is more robust in the things that it offers, but I think really again, going back to what I was saying earlier, the long-term outlook on these companies. I used to be a huge Lyft fan because of the happiness and the tipping and everything, that it was just a better experience. But when you look at it, I mean, they cannot keep drivers. There's a huge driver turnover. They're not paying them enough. Drivers are complaining. It's a bad business to be in, but Uber understands that, and they're positioning themselves to not just deliver people, but they're delivering things. I mean, can you imagine the panic that would set in at a company like 1-800-Flowers, then when one day on Uber you can say, I want some flowers, and while the drivers are driving around picking up people, they might as well pick up some flowers. They can do that kind of thing. They did it with Uber Eats. They can do it with a lot of other companies, a lot of other industries. And I think that Uber is positioning itself much smarter for the future.
So what we're saying here, Jenny, is the Jenny Horn happiness comparison is actually the opposite way of this chart.
It is, but I feel like this show has just become how much Jenny spends money, which is not, it's actually cheaper for me
it's
to
turning
have,
into its own segment.
I know, it's really unfortunate. It's actually cheaper for me to Uber. I figured out, I did some investigating. It's cheaper for me to Uber than it is to own a car. So in the city, that's why I think I have such a high happiness with these companies, because it's a better investment, just saying.
And it's door-to-door service as opposed to taking a train, if that's something that you have as an opportunity to. So a lot of times the convenience factor is worth that premium service. But Landon, when you're looking at this and you talk about, but like we look at the consumer purchase intent, they're both going up. So the stock prices are diverging from that. But to you, is it more just the business model struggles?
Yeah, I think it's a business model struggles, and Jenny brings up a good point about doing the math. A lot of drivers don't do the math. They look at how much they're earning on the top line, and they don't consider insurance and gas and maintenance and everything like that. And MIT did a study where I think they concluded that after all of that, people were averaging under $4 an hour, but it doesn't take long. Even if you're not doing the math, it doesn't take long to you kind of figure out, hey, this isn't worth it. And so the high turnover is just unbelievable. So now you mentioned our purchase intent chart. This is it. We finally got it up. You can see that, on a scale, they're both doing well, but Uber's at all-time highs, whereas Lyft kind of peaked back in the summer of 2018. It's sort of struggling now a little bit. So I think that Uber is positioned to dominate the picking up people and moving that. But again, I don't think that's the future of either company. I think it's picking up things and doing local logistics.